All right, friends, I like this lesson. I like all the lessons. I don't know why I always say that, but we are talking about percent word problems. And I love this because you are going to be using these formulas from now until forever. It will really help with percent problems, ratio problems, that kind of thing. So grab your notebook, write this down. Is over of equals percent over 100, or part over whole equals percent over 100. Part over whole equals percent over 100. Let me fix my light here. Hold on. Okay. So with that said, what we can do is read the first question. That will help. Okay, Kathy, John, and Susie have only 20 chickens left. If they began with 80 chickens, what percent of the original flock remains? So what you're wanting to look for is so the percent, do your setup. First things first, let's do our setup. And what that looks like is fraction equals fraction with 100. Okay, so the thing that we're looking for in this case, it says what percent. Now percent goes above our 100, so the word what means x. So x percent. So we're going to put an x here. The other two numbers we have are 20 and 80. And so we can do this two different ways. We can say the part over the whole. So what's the whole flock? The whole flock is 80, and the part we're trying to find the percentage for is 20%. So this is, so we say 80, and now 20, so they only have 22 chickens, or 20 chickens left. So we're going to say 20, and we're going to put left here. These words are important because that means when we find, this is leftover total, and left over total. So these words are important here, but when we have fraction equals fraction, it's great because we can cross multiply. So I'm going to lob off my zeros first here, and we get 8x equals 200. 8x equals 200. Now, if I divide by 8, I get x equals 25. So what that means is, remember, our x is the percent that we were looking for that is left. So they have 25%, 25% of the chickens, oops, I can't spell, chickens are left. Now go read the question again. What percent of the original flock remains? So in this case, so in this case, it would be 25% of the chickens. However, if it said what percent of the flock have disappeared, I hope it wasn't like a fox, or I live in Alaska, so like, is it a moose, bear, what's going on? But if we say what percent of the original flock has disappeared or is gone, then in that case, it would be 75%, because we want to we really want to pay attention to that percentage. That might be confusing. Let's keep working on these and it'll make more sense. Okay, example 2. Mimi and Jim have 75 thingamabobs. They want to give Hal 20% of them. How many thingamabobs do they give Hal? So let's do our setup. Fraction equals fraction over 100. Now, they want to give, so I always think the percent part is the easiest because you can look and see, like 20%. So 20%, so they're going to give Hal 20% of them. So that goes, because our percent we know goes above 100. That's give to Hal. Now, the other thing we have are 75. Is that our whole or is that our part? Well, they have 75 thingamabobs total, so that's our whole. So 75. If we put an X here, when we find X, that's going to represent how many they need to give to Hal, because that's the same thing that we're putting up here. So we have 100. Actually, let's make it easy. We're going to lob off our zeros. So we could reduce further if you wanted to, but nah, that's right. 10x equals 75 times 2. I still use my calculator for, 150. I made one math error one time that was like super silly, so I have to use my calculator every time. Divide both sides by 10, and this is why I left it as 10, because I can lob off my zeros there, and I get x equals 15. So 15, remember, is give to Hal, because it's in the same thing here. So they are giving Hal 15 thingamabobs. Now, if the question had said how many thingamabobs are going to be left after they give it to Hal, then in that case we would have, it wouldn't be 15, it would be 75 minus those 15. So that's why you have to pay real close attention to your percents there. Okay, example 3. Bo and Christy hide 600 raisins. I don't know why. This is 60% more than they hid last month. What are they doing? How many raisins did they hide last month? Okay, so I just want to make sure I copied that problem down right. I did. So we're going to do our setup. This is another thing that you have to pay attention to with percent problems is, okay, so 60%, we know it's going to go in our percent spot here, but it's more than they hid last month. So let's say this, if they hid 100 last month, this month they're not only hiding that 100, but they're also hiding another 60%, which would be 160. So when you say more than, that means we need to add 100% to it. So 160, okay? And then they are hiding 600 raisins. This is 60% more than they hid last month. So what they hid, how many did they hide last month? They hid 100% of the raisins last month, but we don't know how many that was. We just know the percent part of it. But what we do know is that we have 600 this month. So I'm going to lob off some zeros here, and I get 16x equals 6 with 1, 2, 3 zeros. All right, so then if we do 6,000 and we divide that by 16, we end up with 375. So divide that by 16, we end up with 375. So how many raisins did they hide last month? They hid, remember with word problems, you want to do complete sentences. They hid 375 raisins last month. So be very careful if it says like more than or less than in regards to the percent, because sometimes you need to add 100% to it, or sometimes you need to take it away from 100%. So keep that in mind as you're doing these. Okay, let's take a look at the practice and go from there. So for your practice problems, if you don't have your book, you can look at these guys. We have those 2 practice problems and then this one. So pause the video, try those practice problems, and then come on back. Okay, so these should be your answers, but make sure that you're using complete sentences when you answer them. So we'll go through these together. If you did not get those as your answer, keep with us and we will talk about those. So the other thing is, making sure your units are clear on that. I forgot what else I was going to say. All right, so Jane and Faye have 32 bagatelles left. If they began with 160, what percent of the original remain? Okay, so it's a percent problem. So we're going to do our setup. So they have 32 left, and they began with 160. That means the original total was 160, and they have 32. That was part of it. What percent of the original remain? Well, 32 are left. So whatever percent we find, that's going to be what the percent of them that are left. The other thing I was going to say was, it says that you have to draw a diagram on there. You don't have to draw a diagram if you just, I mean, it might help for you, but you can also just do part over whole equals percent over 100. Okay, so what we end up with is, when I cross multiply, 160x equals 32 times, with 2 zeros, because times 100. Divide both sides by 160. Lob off my zeros here. So when I do that, I end up with 20. So x equals 20. So we go and we look and we see, okay, it's 20% because it's going to be above our 100, and it was left. So they have 20% of the bagatelles left. I'm saving time by not writing a totally complete sentence, but really practice writing your complete sentence where it you restate the question as a sentence, please and thank you. Okay, Caesar's Legion had an inventory of 2,400 pairs of thongs. They normally wear out 30% of their supply by the end of the fiscal year. How many pairs of thongs remain at the end of the fiscal year? So they normally wear out 30%. So how many do they normally wear out? Well, 100. So this is 30%. So I put it over here, but this is wear out. Now, the total is 2,400, right? So I'm going to put an X here, and whatever I find here is the number that they wear out. So lob off my zeros, and I get 10x equals 3 times 2,400 to give me 7,200. Divided by 10, divided by 10. Lob off my zeros, I get x equals 720. Now, They normally wear out 30%. Remember, this is the number that they wear out. Let's look at the question. It says, how many thongs pair, okay, if they normally wear out 30% of how many thongs or pairs of thongs remain at the end of the fiscal year? That means it's the ones that are not worn out. If they're remaining, they're not worn out. So these ones are worn out. So if these ones are worn out, then that, and we started with 2,400, we must subtract 720 from this 2,400. So that would mean 1,680 remain. So be very careful with your numbers there. That one is important. Another way we could have done that is instead of saying 30% here, if we had taken 100 and minus our 30%, we would have gotten 70%. And so if there's 30% are worn out, that means 70% remain. If 20% are worn out, that means 80% remain. Percent's always going to be dealing with 100 as your base percent. I remember that because a percent sign has one line and 2 zeros right there. All right, so Chris and Chad collected 40 items. When they added Kathy's items, their total increased by, okay, so we see increased by 150%. So when you see increased by, got to add another 100 to it. So we have our setup here. All right, what was their new total after Kathy's items were added? So once they added Kathy's, they had 150%. Their total increased. So their total was 100%. Now they add 150% to it. So it's now 250% with Kathy's items, right? So do we know what the total is with Kathy's items? Not the percent total, but the actual items total. No, we do not. So that's an X. But what we do know is Chris and Chad, before adding Kathy's, they had 40. And so that was it before they had it. So if we log off our zeros, we get 10x equals, cross multiply, 40 times 25, which was 1,000. I don't know why I just did that. Second guess myself. Divide by 10, divide by 10. I get, log off my zeros, I get x equals 100. So what was their new total after their new total was 100 items. All right, if you have any questions, leave them below. Otherwise, great work, and I will see you next time.